realized that I couldn't do the Sage on the Stage thing. So I took the approach of doing knowledge transfer completely asynchronously by doing mini lectures. And I wasn't sure how that would work out, but essentially I lectured to myself to a video screen, and I chopped my lectures up into smaller segments. So I teach Tuesday, Thursday classes. That's an hour and 20 minutes of class time. When I was in front of the students, I would do my best to break up my lectures with Q&A and make it interesting, and that worked well. But how do you do that online? So I decided to do, like, if I had a 1 hour lecture, it would be 4 15-minute segments. And at the end of the segments, or in the middle of the segments, I would just put out a thought question where they could pause the video, do an exercise, interact with the video, even though I wasn't present. And what happened with the videos was surprising to me. What the students said is that they absolutely loved them. They liked them a lot more than listening to a live lecture. And the reason is that I was still able to be animated in the lectures and put the knowledge out there. But I speak pretty quickly. I think a lot of us might speak rather fast in the classroom and just personally. And they were able to slow the pace down. They were able to read captioning, and I spent a huge amount of effort captioning my lectures, which turned out to be extremely important, because then they could listen to the lecture, read the content, slow it down, rewind it, repeat segments. And then at the end of each group of mini lectures, which for me would have constituted a class, I would have a formative assessment. And these were a problem that was derived from the material. It was a series of multiple choice questions. It could be any exercise that they had to have watched the videos and gotten the information to do well on the formative assessment. So I'm going to keep that as we go back. I'm not going to be the Sage on the Stage. I'm going to have all of my knowledge transfer be through these mini lectures. And what the consequence of that is I still teach Tuesday, Thursday, but now I'm only going to meet with the class 1 day a week instead of 2. That gives them more time to go through the videos. And then when we meet, we'll go through the formative assessment, which, if they struggled, I can answer those questions directly. But then we also have projects. And I've noticed there's a couple of questions coming up already about how do you do group work when we're supposed to be socially distanced. So I think that would be a fun topic to explore during this hour that we have on how to interact with the class in person to get that the interaction between students. So I don't know if that answers everything, but it'll be.
Yeah, I'm going to come in there, Lisa, and I've been making some notes because you've pulled in lots of good points about blended learning, even though you went from in-person learning to online learning, and now you're looking to go blended as we head into the fall. And I think as that's going to be common with many other instructors as well, that you've been very busy this past year building things like videos, like PDFs, things that even if you're going back into the classroom, you don't have to start from scratch. Can you take these online artifacts that you've built, and now how are you going to create the blend? Lisa was speaking to the theory, the Sage on the Stage stuff, that no longer, when do students need you the most? You've got the videos, so they don't need you at that time. They need you for the application part, and that's your Tuesday, Thursday. So another point there is that you said you're reducing the seat time. A common error in blended learning is just to add more stuff because we feel like we need to do more. And so you're giving to it. It's not like they do nothing on Tuesdays. They are going to be engaging with the content. And then Thursdays is when you bring in the active learning part there. So that's a consideration of blended learning. And you also pointed out that one of the major benefits of videos is you talk fast, students can slow the videos down, they can replay them as many times as they need to. It's a richer resource than this in-person Sage on the Stage experience. So thank you for bringing up all of those things. Graham, what do you think?
It's a different mindset in a way. I mean, it's trying to get the students to, not trying, but getting the students to realize that the knowledge transfer, the knowledge is there. I mean, they can go onto the internet and they can get the knowledge. I mean, they don't need me to teach them some of the knowledge. What they need is for me to teach them the skills that you need when you have the knowledge, or how to put that knowledge into some kind of context, which makes it relevant for their particular learning. So the idea of taking videos and having the students do them outside of class time, well, it's still technically class time, outside of the face-to-face time, is sensible, because then when they are with you and they do have the questions, your role is then to say, well, you've got the knowledge, you've watched the video, you've taken your notes. What does that mean for you? What does it mean for this course? What does it mean for this degree? What does it mean for here's how you make the connections. I always like to think of it, and it's kind of weird. It's almost like I'm the director of an orchestra or something, and I'm the one saying, okay, horns, you've got your section, and you've learned this, but you've only learned the notes. You have to see how it all connects with the rest of the orchestra to make sense to it. And my job as the conductor is to help that. Not the best analogy, but it's one that works. And I get the impression that's what you're doing. What is interesting to me, and I know that this question is going to come up because it always does, is you said that you're having the students come in, you've given them a formative assessment for them to do outside of class, and they come into class and you discuss it. So it's a formative assessment, which means it's not being graded. So what is your experience been with having students actually do assessments that are only formatively being assessed rather than being graded?
Yeah, I actually found them quite useful. So they're not marked, but they do get, I think it's 10% or something just for participating in the formative assessment. So even though they don't get a mark for them, they do get it is still a mark, because that they need to have something that shows that they should put effort into it. But the thing is that when they come to class, if they have not gone through the material, if they have not done the formative assessment, then it's going to be a foreign language to them in the classroom, because we're going to start right away with, this is how these microbial cells work. That's the subject of my class. So, let's talk about this molecule. And they might say, oh my gosh, I have no idea what that molecule is because I didn't watch the video. And so if they are taking the class for a purpose, which is to learn my field, then they're going to be inspired to watch those videos. But what I heard from the students is that they didn't need any incentive to watch the videos because they quite enjoyed them. And so I guess there's something to be said in putting some effort and energy into making the videos engaging. I know not all of us can do that, but or we can try. I think that it's worth putting in the energy to really feel, even though you don't have the audience in front of you, engage them with that interface, because when they come to class already excited to discuss the material.
One of the things I know, Lisa, you and I had talked about in the past was about how long should my videos be? And I know you had said earlier on that you've broken them into 15-minute slots. And I know one of the examples that I use is about going for a meal. When I used to be able to travel in the before times, when I would go to all my friends in France, I would sit down and have a 9-course meal over 5 hours. And how on earth I managed to eat all that food always amazes me to this day. While here I have one meal and I'm stuffed. I'm usually too busy. The point of that is that if you think about what you want, the content that you want the students to learn as a meal, and are you giving them the whole plate and you expect them to shove it all in their mouth in an hour, and it's too much, you get stuffed, you feel ill. But if you break things down into in your case, 15-minute segments, you are giving students a chance to digest it, to think about it. But then they know it's only 15 minutes. So it's a psychological trick there. It's only a 15-minute video. I can watch a 15-minute video and I can retain the information in 15 minutes on the whole. And then at the end of that 15 minutes, I can think about it, reflect on it. I can stop, take a break, go and do my dishes, walk the dog, reflect on it, come back and watch the next one. Or if I'm really into it, it's not a big deal for me just to go to the next video and start playing it. So breaking that down, I think, is really, really wise. It helps to facilitate learning in a very subtle way. But even it may look busy on eClass. You got all these videos in a row. but it means that students can say, I know I can spend 15 minutes and that's not a problem. So really, in a way, you're not seeing your job as the sage on the stage as the lecturer, but from what I'm getting is you almost see yourself more as like I said, the conductor or a facilitator. Is that right?
Yeah. In a live classroom context, yes, it's much more of a facilitated discussion, and the students talk amongst themselves and they help each other solve the problems that I've given them for the assessments. And then I'll throw in, I have a bank of questions for group problem solving. I haven't thought through completely how I'm going to do interaction in the classroom with social distancing. I think that's going to be, it would be fun to hear what maybe people who are watching this have to think about how to do interactions, or Anita, I'm sure you have ideas of how to do in-person interactions in that way. But yes, it's a facilitated discussion when it's in person.
Yeah, the role of the facilitator, you're right. When you're in the classroom and now you're scaffolding these activities, you need to run the activities in the class, but also the facilitation of the course outside of class. How are you engaging with students through forum posts, through announcements, through weekly debriefs, or what are you can't just create a nice e-class course and click start and off it runs like it's a canned course. You have a facilitator role outside of the classroom as well. I want to pull you back a little bit, Lisa, because Katie had a question about what size of class you were referring to. What is your size of your class? And you also touched upon the importance of having students be prepared when they come to class. This blended doesn't work if students come to class not having engaged with the content, because then you just have to say the content again, then nobody's going to do it. And so we call them entry tickets. So can you talk a little bit more about, I'm assuming your class is likely larger, and then how if you want them to work on the content on Tuesdays, how are you going to have them come prepared for Thursday's class?
Yeah, so my classes are 40 to 50 people. Right now it's 50, but you never know with that drop, how that goes. My classroom is actually capped. I think most of our classrooms are capped because of social distancing. So it'll be about 50 people. The way that I engage with them outside of the in-person class time. So on Tuesday, we still have in their timetables that same block of 80 minutes that they would have normally had. And so what the TA for the class and I are doing is we are creating a Zoom room during that class time for the entirety of that 80 minutes for students to drop in a free office hour. They can come in and talk about whatever they want with course content, if they have questions about their projects, anything that they desire. Obviously all 50 people wouldn't be coming to that Zoom chat, but it gives them another opportunity to have us there to speak to them live about the content. And then my eClass page is also interactive and it changes. So I break it down by weeks and I post the basic information for them to see each week, but then material will be posted as we go through it. And even after we've gone through the live classroom, then there's summaries that are posted from that live classroom. So it's not like the eClass page is static. It also is a dynamic interface for them to engage with.
Lisa, you did this last year. Well, years past during COVID. You had that kind of two class situation where you saw them on Zoom one day, and another day, as you said, was just, I'm going to be on Zoom. Come in if you want. How did that go?
Oh, it was so fun. That was my favorite part of the class because the people that would come, and it was, so I had 47 students and about 25 would come to each one of those discussions. But we didn't just talk about the class. We talked about the field generally. We talked about other topics in microbiology. Some of them ended up applying to graduate school in my field after that, even though they thought they were going to do something else with their lives. So it was informal enough that they just felt comfortable and excited enough to come and talk about microbiology.
That's really exciting because, I mean, we talk about, we want to have good relationships with students. We want to build up the interest. And so it's not just like I'm going through I'm just going through the motions. of doing the reading and coming to class, it's really exciting to hear that 25 people, like over half of the people were coming, and it was a social time in a way. Is that, yeah?
Yeah, and I actually do teach two classes. The other one is an applied class. And so the students that would come to that they had to design a website for their project. And so those conversations are more about web design, how to organize their product so that they could win the competition because they had to compete against another group. And so I would have each group, in that case, I would do a breakout room to talk to groups individually so the rest of the class wouldn't get the beans spilled, because they want to, have it be an exciting moment where they unveil their website. So that worked a little bit differently because I had to meet with the group separately.
That's interesting. I mean, I think, and I know that I've met other people, and even myself, sometimes you think, if we build it, will they come? And if I'm going to be sitting in a room for 70 minutes, okay, I can be doing other things, but is it going to be a waste of time? And it's interesting to know that often it is not a waste of time, because the people who are coming have the questions, but it helps to build up good relationships with your students.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was really inspiring to me. I really enjoyed that part. And I'm hopeful that it stays that way through the blended learning experience, that I'll create those relationships that are likely going to be created virtually and not in person, which is odd because we think about going back in person, that's where we're going to meet the students face to face, and that will build the relationship. But there's an interesting thing that happens with these Zoom type conversations that's even more intimate.
That's really interesting. Anita, do you want to add anything to that or make any comment?
No, I won't add into that one. Yeah, it's still just so dynamic and unfolding that we'll see what awaits us, and not to just dive into the fall. Well, we'll see what happens. The more you prepare and plan, the more smoothly the fall is going to go for you. But also knowing that you might have to throw your plan out the window. It's easier to throw your plan out the window and be in the moment if you need to, if you have already planned. So. Yeah,
that's great. There's a couple of questions coming on the spreadsheet. I'm going to bring them in. Let's throw them into the chat so everyone can see them. So one of the questions we have is, are the faculties getting any direction on how we are supposed to proceed? For example, all I've been told is that my class is in person.
Yeah, that's a tricky one, because when you look at any of the courses when the students are looking on the courses on Bear Tracks and building their schedules, there's either a class, an actual room assigned to a class, or it says online. And online is evident what that means. It still has designated times, but it's there's no physical class. But even when there's a classroom assigned, and now we're talking about seat time, and are they coming to class on Tuesdays or are they not? So even if a student is signed up for a physical class, in-person class, they're going to come to that day one and find out, is it blended? Do I need to be in a seat on Monday, Wednesday, Fridays from 10 to 11 a.m. or whatever your class time happens to be? Because we're in this time where we are so happy to come back to campus, but we are also working in pandemic times where we need to be compassionate and flexible for the students who aren't able to come. So that I think there is still uncertainty at the faculty and department level. And I can't speak any more to that. Can you, Graham or Lisa, from your perspective?
One of the issues that we have is again, it's this complete uncertainty. I mean, welcome to uncertainty, like as if we haven't had that for the last 16 months. And Kyle just sent me a message. I think Kyle meant for it to be for the whole room, but that's okay. I'll just copy what they've said. What if this fourth wave gets worse and we go back to online in September? I mean, we have these courses which are set for being in person, but we don't know what's going to happen with the future variants. So flexibility is certainly the name of the game. So even an in-person course might end up being a non-in-person course. We just don't know. So being prepared for the various options is, I think, particularly wise. And how we do that is different for different people and different for different faculties as well. And unfortunately, I wish I had a crystal ball. What we don't know what's going to happen, and we also don't know what's going to work the best for your learners and for you. I mean, we're all different. We all learn differently. We all teach differently. All we can do here at CTL is to provide you with the enough keys to open enough doors so you can pivot. That's the word that seems to be big at the moment, being able to pivot. The answer is basically we just have to be flexible, and we have to tell, as we said, Anita, tell students that, okay, it's an in-person course, but we can be flexible. We have to be.
And if we have the artifacts, we've been building artifacts over the past year. Lisa, you have your videos and your resources. If you're, it seems that it would be easier to take an online course into the physical classroom where every student has devices and to run that in person with the luxury of being in person than it was when we were all in person. Doors were shut a year ago, March, and now you're wondering, do I need to photocopy things and mail them to students? How am I going to get my resources to students to finish off the term? That was definitely a tougher transition. Someone made a note earlier that, I said, oh, you have your videos, just reuse them. Well, videos are very quickly become outdated. And if you're using the same videos all the time, and they can start to feel, students will be on to you that, oh, those are old. Those are from a few terms ago. And I want to feel like I have my instructor with me now in the moment. How do your, biology is biology, but there's lots of disciplines that have, so does biology, has current events that are affecting the content. What do you think about that, Lisa, about your ability to reuse last year's stuff, but also ensuring that it's current and students feel like they're not just getting old stuff?
Right. Yeah. So I think that when you're doing knowledge transfer, there's always a base of knowledge in a field. And so there's some things that never change, like just the foundational knowledge of any field. So I am the kind of person who is not opposed to making new videos and inserting a few new ones into each lecture. So there's about 75 videos for a course, and I'll probably remake, anywhere between 5 and 10 of them. But I like doing that. I actually enjoy making the videos. I know not everybody likes to do that, but if there's something exciting that I want them to know, then I will make a new video. This year I invited my colleagues who are looking for students in there, because we have research labs in the science world. So they're always recruiting project students. And so I have 3 colleagues who are making 15-minute videos that I'll integrate into the material. And I'll just take out some of my videos to make room. I don't believe in adding more content, because I think that's asking too much out of classroom time. So I try to keep the total number or the total amount of time for videos to an hour a week. If it goes to an hour and 15 or an hour and 20 for some topics, that's okay. But I don't want to have them looking at more than an hour of video content each week.
What about accommodations? We think everyone loves videos, but some people would rather have a transcript to read, or they want to look at it on the bus, or that just the videos.
Some students didn't watch the videos at all, and instead they read the captioning transcripts, which is the exact same thing as the video. It's just reading my words instead of watching me say them. But I also have, I use PowerPoint materials so they can read the transcript and relate it to the individual slides, because the transcript follows with the presentation that I had recorded. So my recordings have my face and all of my big hand gestures. I do that a lot. So if they want to watch that, they can, or hear my voice, but they can also just look at the transcript and slides and get the same information.
Yeah. I see a note in the text or chat asking about tools. And I liked what you said about, you personally enjoy making videos, and it is a skill to be honed. But I'd like to bring up the point that also that the less polished it is, the better. If you're approaching the videos is that they have to be well done and a masterpiece, and then you create them and it took you hours to create a 15-minute video, then that's not sustainable. And students love off the cuff instructor videos. So less tech savviness is actually can really work in your favor. And then you as an instructor don't feel so overwhelmed when you do have to redo a video. You just turn on the camera and start talking. I mean, what about tools?
We're not Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
We're not Disney, we're not Pixar. And I think we oftentimes forget, we expect it to be the show, and it's not a show. So I think it's important. You're right, Anita, that when you're making these videos up, you don't have to make them perfect. I mean, one would encourage you to make them a little bit engaging. I mean, you don't want a video that looks like this for 15 minutes. Nobody wants that. And I'm sure none of you do that anyway. And I think it's important. Again, I think it also links back to other things. If you have a video and there's a couple of mistakes in it, that's fine. It lasts for 10 or 15 minutes. People will watch it. And if there are mistakes, there are mistakes. And I know myself, when I did this, when my videos would have a mistake in them. I would say the wrong thing by mistake. I would say blue instead of green or whatever. I mean, our brains are weird. We do weird things. We say dumb things sometimes. So sometimes I would listen to the video back and I go, oh, what? I meant to say this word and I said this word. Well, if you have it on YouTube, for example, there's nothing to stop you from creating a little message box that pops up on YouTube that says, oops, I meant to say this. Mm-hmm. And that's a really easy way to fix those flubs rather than having to go back and redo it. And someone had mentioned in the questions, well, that's all very well, but as time goes on, you don't have time to go back and do the videos again. You're right. I remember once I learned this the hard way. My videos all started by saying, turn to like page 16 of the textbook and you've already read this, look at this picture or whatever. And then that was great. I spent all this time making these videos with little sound effects, and it was like a lot of fun. And then they upgraded the textbook. All the pages were wrong. It's like, oh no. So I thought, I'm not going to go back and redo all that. It took me like months to do all of that stuff. So I just went into YouTube and said, update. If you've got this version of the textbook, it's this page instead. And then maybe like over time, when I had a bit of time, I just did one or two at a time and redid them. So I learned to future-proof, to try to avoid putting in information that I might have to redo. Sometimes you can't help it. I mean, as you said, Anita, things change. But trying to think about what do I have to put in the video and what can I maybe put in somewhere else so that avoids me from having to redo it is very helpful.
Yeah, you're right. I've helped instructors make videos and we've supplemented. I like that future proof, Graham. That's a good term. That what can you put in your videos that will be sustainable for a little while anyways. And if you have a supplemental handout that goes with the videos, it could have the transcript, it could have additional resources, it could have you writing in the handout. So this is a little at minute 2:30 in the video, I said this, it was wrong. You could have this kind of contextual information in a handout for students so they have it as a guide when they're watching the videos. That's something that can help keep this resource sustainable over a longer time.
Well, in terms of the professional or not professional nature of videos, one of the things that made people want to watch my videos is I had this big cat house behind me, and my cat became like a unofficial star of the videos. And so he would hang out there, and then sometimes he'd be there, sometimes he wouldn't. And he would move around, like depending on the video. So some of the students, like, I just wanted to see what was happening with the cat. So, there can be unprofessional but fun things that are an entry point for engagement with the students.
That's true. And I know one particular individual who I will not mention, but there is a professor on campus, and the videos that they made, they had a little like figurine and they kept moving it in different places around the background. And it became a bit of almost like where's Wally or where's
Waldo? Yeah, it could do fun things.
It sounds stupid. You think, really, come on. I mean, but it's amazing how those little snippets can really grab people's attention.
Yeah.
It's kind of fun.
At least makes them push play so they can see what's, and then they'll watch the video once they've started.
Yeah.
That seems to me there was a survey done by the Students' Union. I accessed it on the Students' Union website last year. I can't say exactly what there was a point in there where students told us that they liked our cats, they liked our children, they liked whatever, instructors are humans first, and students are humans first. And this is just neat that we're coming together in this digital format. So yeah, you don't have to be anything that you're not. If you're not comfortable with that, then certainly you wouldn't need to do that. But interesting that the students were receptive to that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just going through the list of questions. Great. Thank you, everyone, for throwing in your questions onto the forms. This is really helpful. Just back a bit. Someone had said, if we have Zoom Q&A sessions, we are assuming students have computer access on campus with audio capacity, and this seems hard. You're right. I mean, there is no, we're in times where we're all trying to figure things out, and we don't have a perfect solution, although I would argue there never was a perfect solution. But you're right. We have to think about how are we accommodating folks that may not be in the middle of Edmonton and have 5G connections. How do we support that? And there isn't an easy answer. There's no simple answer. The answers are all very bespoke. You have to look at the individual and say, well, how can we help to accommodate you? Maybe it's a case of, okay, you can use your phone. Do you have a phone? Do you have a phone that has unlimited calling? Can you call into the Zoom room? Are there other things? And there are many different ways of doing it. That's only one. But you really will only know what's going to help your learners to learn by talking to them and by saying, and by encouraging them to come to you when they do have these difficulties, because students are sometimes very awkward about doing that. And that comes back full circle to the beginning of this conversation where we're talking about, Lisa was saying about, building up that rapport, like having a day where people can just talk, and it's about work, but it can be just about social things or whatever. Building up that trust and that relationship with the students allows them to feel more comfortable to say, look, I'm having a real problem here. Can we find a solution? And again, there's no magic formula to make that happen. It's not a case of you have a choice of the red pill or the blue pill, and one will work and one won't. It's just a case of the best way to help your students is by communicating with them and by allowing them to feel comfortable enough to communicate with you. It was always that power differential, but if you can kind of find the balance to allow them to, okay, we know there's a power differential, but I feel I can trust you to say, I'm struggling. I don't have an internet connection. I'm living, I'm overseas. There's a time difference, and to accommodate that. That doesn't mean you have to do everything to accommodate that. I mean, sometimes it's just not, like, I'm sorry, I'm living in a different time zone, and I want my exam to be at this time. Well, that isn't always possible. So just because you're accommodating doesn't mean you're accepting. But you can find that by communicating with the student, you can come to something which is reasonably appropriate for all parties most of the time.
And you're going into the topic of barriers. So I think the barriers are where the questions are going to be coming, that there are barriers to blended learning, tech equity, tech competence, time zones, other accommodation concerns that can't be addressed or are difficult to address when we're not in the same physical space together. And there are solutions, and there are win-win solutions, or maybe that aren't so win-win, and they need to be kind of tackled one at a time. But you're right, Graham, that the underlying, the foundation for all the barriers is communication, because we want students to buy into a blended format. We want to there are so many benefits to blended learning as compared to traditional didactic teaching. And Sage on the Stage, as Lisa was referring to, that communication is your first step to creating this with students. There's two questions in the form. They're kind of relating to the definition of blended overall. And earlier when we were speaking about the Tuesday, Thursday, and the framework of Lisa's blended course, that's really what right now we're meaning by blended learning, where you're blending the the content and the practical application. But there is a concern right now with classes of the blending of the time and place, where we're going to be in a physical classroom, but some students are going to be calling in synchronously in real time to that classroom. They're going to be joining by Zoom, whether it's because they're sick or they're not on overseas, or whatever the reason happens to be. And so that's something. The word more for that is, it's all words, hybrid or blended synchronous, where we have students in seats and students attending at the same time. And oh my goodness, now what's your role as the facilitator to do? I'm just going to ask that question and see what you two would like to.
Well, I'm
go with that.
I'm reading the comments coming in, and one person has said, "Thank you for your honesty." Some of you are making some comments which are very honest and very what's I'm looking for, making you very vulnerable, and we appreciate that honesty and that vulnerability. As you have noticed, we don't have all the answers. We're learning as well. But there's one particular comment here, and this person starts out by saying, "I'm freaking out." Oh, I think we've all been there. But I don't mean to trivialize that, but I mean, we've all been there. In that particular comment, I would strongly recommend maybe emailing me or emailing CTL and maybe having a consultation so we can actually go through it and give you some bespoke support. But this individual was just worried about, I can't do everything. And you're right, you can't do everything. I know that their IST are working on software which will be available through eClass, and it's still going through the process, so it's not guaranteed yet. But I know it's going through things, which might make it easier to be able to lecture capture when you're doing a live lecture. So you can just, if you're in one of these new fancy rooms they're building, you can just press the button and it records you and it's done. It's a bit more complex than that, but it's coming. We're hoping. But what I would say is, don't panic. No one is expecting you to do everything. No one's expecting you to be perfect. And most importantly, the students are not expecting you to be perfect. And I know that it may seem counterproductive because that's what we always think. Oh my gosh, we have the USRIs. Students are also going through a pandemic, and they also know how challenging it is. And they, more than ever before, are probably more forgiving than ever before. So give yourself a break. It's okay to be panicking. It's okay to not know what to do. That's why we have a Center for Teaching and Learning. So if you are really concerned and you just don't know where to turn, we're here. We don't have all the answers, but we can certainly help guide you and help you to see the light at the end of the tunnel.
And there is no cookie cutter. Wouldn't it be fun if there was just a cookie cutter and we could just hand it out and you could, fill in the holes with your discipline specific content? There really isn't. There's so many factors of number of students. Do you have chairs bolted to the floor? That kind of thing. So we're speaking more conceptually and broadly, but that's what we do daily. Is we look at individual course sites. We have individual conversations to help sort out what is the best blend for you and how do you make that happen.
Yeah.
I also wanted to respond. There's in the question you were just referring to, but there's also another question about technology. And this is another plug for CTL. So first of all, I was mentioning how my videos are captioned. CTL actually has quite a number of technology options that you can look at for automatic captioning of lectures. So if you're planning on lecturing live to your students, you can have those lectures captioned and record it. So there's ways to do that. But there was also a question of how I did it. And the answer is that Graham taught me how. And not only that, but he gave a department-wide workshop. So the entire Department of Biological Sciences was invited to attend a session that was a training session that Graham held for us on Zoom. We had quite a large turnout, and he just went through step by step. These are ways you can record your lecture. These are ways you can caption it. This is how you upload it to YouTube. And he gave us a number of options, and it made it really easy because it was just a stepwise program of how to get your videos online the most efficient and easy way possible without a lot of effort. So I'm shopping you out a little bit, Graham, but I know that you're willing to do that for faculties.
Thank you. Thank you. That's really kind of you to say that. I'm pretty sure, and Lily will, who is listening in on this, Lily works at CTL and is one of the backbones of CTL. Lily is the person who manages our website and keeps us all organized. So we could not survive without Lily. So thank you, Lily, for being here and helping out today. But I'm pretty sure that on our website, we have that information about how you can do those live captioning. You can see now we have live captioning running at the moment. If you want to do that, there you see, look at that. See, Lily is amazing. Honestly, Lily does not get as much praise as she deserves. She's incredible. So the information about that is all there. And again, if you want more bespoke support, we have a consultation page at ctl.guide/consultation request. You can also find it on our website. And you can ask for a consultation and it'll come to myself or Anita or one of our other ed developers. And we'd be more than happy to help you out. So you don't have to feel stuck.
Katie put in the chat about the iffiness of transcription for Greek and Latin, but I imagine that's the same for science as well. The auto ones are, they're not too perfect, but they're in the moment, they're okay. But if you are creating this handout idea, if you create a video and now you can go in and you can edit those. And then if you're creating the transcript of to provide students with a written transcript, there'll be a little bit of editing that you'll need to do on the side before post-production. One thing
I'm going to plug a third-party software. And by the way, if you are using third-party software, just be aware of the regulations and the rules regarding that. But there is a really interesting and helpful third-party software called Otter.ai, which it's very, very good. It's not perfect, but it's a bit better than what we're seeing here. However, in saying that, there's also, like I said, something coming down the pipeline, which will work through eClass, which will also do transcription. And I'm testing it at the moment with some of my colleagues, and it is very good. And apparently, although I haven't tested this part yet, it'll also do translations. So that's coming down the pipeline. One hopes. It's not definite yet, but keep your fingers crossed for that. So there are other options to be able to do that kind of transcription.
So we're getting into the topic of support because that's why you're here today. It's August 12th and September 1 is very quickly approaching. And how can you get support? And in these couple of weeks, we have this session. We're only an email away, but then support along the way. That maybe you don't need support September 1, maybe you need it October 1 or along the way. But and our CTL website is very heavy in how to build and deliver your online course, because that's where we were this previous year. So much of that is completely applicable to blended as well, but you'll see over time our website is very dynamic, that it's changing to be an online and blended resource for you 24/7. As well. Mm-hmm.
That's true. I mean, we're working very hard. For those of you who know us, you know that we're a very small but very mighty team. This is my phrase. We're small but mighty. We are a very small team. So unfortunately, we are not always able to get material up online as fast as we would like, especially when we're creating videos or making explanatory videos and so on. So sorry for not getting things up as fast as we'd like, but we are working very hard to take the material we've created in the last 16 months, which is mostly for online teaching, but not all, and reviewing that and seeing how we can then tweak it or amend it so that it also will give you support for that hybrid model of teaching live face-to-face while also recording. So we're constantly, as Lily has very kindly put into the chat, we're constantly reviewing our support materials with online and what we're providing regarding webinars, webinets. Our webinets are just like mini webinars, like 15 minutes long. And all of that is available on our website. I'm sure Lily will be in a moment just throwing a bunch of links at you. So the webinets, and what we did with webinets last year was we took a lot of the questions that we got last year from the Online Institute, from our Festival of Teaching and Learning, from our consultations. And we used all that to make a bank of, okay, here are little mini videos we need to make, or little talks we need to do to help people, because this is what people are asking us. So we try to be as responsive as possible to what questions we get from you, because at the end of the day, you're at the proverbial chalk face. And we need to hear from you so that we can help support you. It's a cyclical thing.
Graham, I noticed there's one more in the chat again about the blended synchronous, students calling in synchronously to a face-to-face class. And oh my goodness, how is that supposed to work? I've taught that way quite a bit. It's kind of like air traffic control. And as an instructor, I've definitely been on a learning curve of what to click and when and how to engage the online students and the face-to-face students synchronously. It's easy in a Sage on the Stage approach. If it's just me talking, then you listen from wherever you're going to be listening to. But it's the active learning, the groups, the case discussions, the labs, those kinds of things that get trickier when you. Graham, do you want to speak to what we know so far?
Yeah. There's a couple of things that we're thinking about. And I know this sounds a bit like a cop-out response, and it's not a cheat response, but it is an honest one. Is that sometimes we forget that why are we always the ones trying to figure this out? Ask the students. There's nothing wrong at the very first week by saying, okay, look, this is how I envision this, but I'm not sure how this would work for you folks. So let's have a discussion, and also helps to build up a good rapport with your students to say, what do you think? Do you have someone might go, there's a great piece of software we could use called this. You go, okay. Or, well, I think this would work. Oh yeah, that's a good idea. Or I prefer this. And you'll get sometimes, conflicting comments, but you'll get comments. So I would say it doesn't always have to be down to you. And in saying that, of course, you have to have some kind of organization. So when you are thinking about trying to do something or calling in synchronously, it might be a case of saying, okay, I'm doing a synchronous talk. Let's say, for example, it's Zoom. So you're doing a Zoom class, maybe it's live, maybe it's both, and someone is called in. So what you have to think about is it's kind of like when you watch a movie and you have the audio description, not just the subtitles, but someone actually is talking. Jordan picks up the spoon and walks towards the sink, that kind of thing. Now, I'm not suggesting you should be, Graham moves his hand across the screen and blinks his eyes. No, I'm not saying that, of course. But what I am saying, that could be quite funny. What I am saying is think about when you have an opportunity for the students to work synchronously in a group. You might say, okay, I'm now going to put everyone into groups. Those of you who have called in, the two of you, I'm going to put you into the same group together. And you're going to be with Caleb, Huiling, and Amy. So just a little bit of audio explanation, thinking about in the back of your mind, if I can't see this, I'm only hearing this, does it make sense? So if you're bringing up a picture, maybe you're showing a picture or you're showing a PDF of something or a diagram, then you need to think in advance, well, if I've got people calling in, that diagram or that picture or that PDF or whatever needs to be on eClass or somewhere where the students can download it or look at it, either in advance or whatever. So that I would say, now looking at the picture, which is file, heart.jpg, that's on eClass, by the way. So again, it's just providing that little audio cue to help people to know when to do what they need to do if they can't see it. It all comes down to individual and bespoke circumstances. So it's really helpful if you do have these questions or you try it and if you try something and it doesn't work, or you're not sure how to make it work. Again, I would suggest contacting CTL. Also, you can contact the folks who deal with accommodation. I don't have their email or their webpage at the moment, but I am guaranteeing right now Lily is scrambling to look for the page for accommodation and it can paste it. So that may be helpful too. Katie, we do not have an ETA for the new software. It's going through a process. I honestly don't know. I have no idea. I think it is, and this is a personal, I have no official capacity here. Personally, I cannot see how it would be ready and supported appropriately for this term. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's a big, huge bunch of people in IST behind the scenes doing this. But my gut feeling is it would probably be starting next year.
I have a folder of articles on hybrid or blended synchronous, high flex blended synchronous teaching. The concern that we're discussing here, the teaching in real time with in-person students and remote students synchronously. And this is kind of where we start with our resources. We know it's a concern. We consult the literature and see what are other people doing. Let's see what we can bring together. And then I turn it into a handout. So if you email me and go, I'm worried about this, what's my next steps? We can meet for a consult, but I can give you my handout. And then this also becomes a webinet or a webinar. This is how we unfold our schedule. So I was just peeking at my folder right now. It's a little messy, so I don't want to give you anything in the chat, but know that the high flex or hybrid or blended synchronous, it's on our radar.
I think that's a really good point. I mean, and it's very sneaky, and I admit this totally. One of the reasons that we ask you to put the questions into these anonymous Google form is that we have them, and we have them in one space. And it means that we do, after the Institute, we will go through this next week, and we'll say, right, from all these questions, what do we need to, or what should we be creating in terms of videos, in terms of webinets or webinars to support staff? So these questions that you're seeing, even though they're personal, obviously we'll pull that out. These are incredibly helpful for us to know how you, as the chalk face people, are managing and not managing or struggling. So that it really helps us to help you. Again, there's tons of stuff on our website now, and we're always adding to it. And for those of you who know CTL, we redid our website a couple of months ago, and we've hopefully made it much easier to locate things. So we've broken things down. On the whole, it's broken down into 4 main sections. Are you planning? Are you preparing? Are you implementing? Are you teaching? Are you thinking about assessment of students? And then also reflecting on your own teaching. So when you go to the website, you scroll down past I call it the intro adverts. And you can also scroll past the cartoon version of me. Thank you, Lily. You'll see preparation, implementation, assessment, and reflection. And that's the meat and potatoes of what we're doing on our website. And you'll find lots of stuff in there. But what we suggest is that's a starting point. Like, our website doesn't give you all the answers. It gives you step 1 or maybe step 2 and 3. So you can go through those steps, and you may have more questions. You may think, okay, I've got the idea. I've got the knowledge. Now, how do I do something with it? Now, this takes us right back to the beginning of this whole conversation, where the website gives you the knowledge, but then you can then come to us to help you put that into some kind of context and skill.
Like, we have a blended approach. We provide the theory online, and we're here when you need us for the practical application of it.
Wow, that circled around really well. That was not planned, by the way. That just worked really, really well. So one of the things I saw earlier on was someone had asked about, can you talk more about entry tickets? I think we kind of did that, but is there anything else you want to add to that, Anita? Or
Yeah, an entry ticket it's a low stakes formative thing that students do prior to coming to class, so that you know that they're coming to class prepared, and then you're not just having to say again what they were supposed to be looking at in the videos or the readings beforehand. So it could be a very short, even low cognitive level definitive quiz where they're just showing that they did the work, and it's worth 0.5% each week to their mark. Unfortunately, our students are very mark driven, but you can even the smallest of mark can be motivating for them. Maybe it's a 1-minute paper, or a reflection question, or a muddiest point question. It's something. Let's say you have a Monday, Wednesday, Friday blended course. Mondays attendance is not required. Here are the readings and videos you need to do. You can do them during class time. You can do them on Sunday. You can do them on Saturday. You can do them on Tuesday if you need to. But really, there's your Monday work to do. Maybe Tuesday by 8 p.m., they have to have done the thing, the entry ticket. And then you, as the instructor, can look at what has happened in that entry ticket, and it could actually help you build your Wednesday class. At the beginning of Wednesday, when you are together synchronously, you can say, here are 3 areas of misconceptions or muddiest points, or 3 things that you told me in your entry ticket. Let's address those first, and now we'll get into our activities. So an entry to our Monday, Wednesday, Friday class, the entry ticket would be the do it Tuesday by 8 p.m. kind of thing, a quiz, something that they type, a journal entry, that kind of thing.
Another question that just came up was, if teaching a face-to-face class, I could see students requesting meetings via Zoom. Is this a good idea to do so? And when you'd rather meet them face-to-face? ? My argument is yes. It's a pretty simple answer. Yes. And the reason is that we have this traditional concept of the university, which is all the students will come to the university and then they get the knowledge and then they go away. And the world has changed in so many ways. Sometimes we just physically can't get there. I mean, if you've got a student in, say, Taiwan who's doing the work online, they're not going to be coming to talk to you face to face. That's a severe example, but it could even be a student who has a question, or maybe, as Lisa has done, you've got your time where it's a face-to-face, or face-to-face, and it's also the online. You may have a student who's working and wants to have a question, wants to talk to you, and you want face-to-face, but maybe they've got 2 kids at home. Maybe they've got an ill mother. Maybe they're not well. Maybe they're concerned about coming into class, coming onto campus because of COVID. Maybe there are transportation issues, and there are no issues regarding being able to afford to get to the university. There are so many other variables outside of the scope of, you are the student, you should be doing this. So I think it's wise to always think about where the student is coming from. And most students are genuinely willing to learn and want to learn. I think we beat that out of them sometimes, but they want to learn. And inadvertently, I think sometimes, I'm not suggesting you're doing this, by the way, this individual, but I think that we inadvertently put barriers to learning, whether it be visual, whether it be social, whether it be financial. And so I would encourage you to just think about, what were you like as a student? Guess what? It isn't like that anymore. When I was a student, I think maybe 5% of us worked. I think now the statistics are like 85% of students work. I mean, it's a different world than when we were students. And if you try to impose your own learning experience onto the current generation of students, it's bound to cause conflict. So I would strongly recommend and encourage you to think a little bit differently about, what do you want from your students? Bob Duke made a very interesting comment yesterday, which is, why do we assess the way we assess? And he made a comment, which I've heard many times before, and I say it myself, which is, are you assessing because you're stopping someone from doing something, or to make sure someone has done something? When I was teaching in Glasgow, I used to say to my students, because I was in education, I was teaching students to be teachers, and I would say, I am here to facilitate your learning as someone who works at the university. I am here to help you become a teacher, but I'm no your mommy. In other words, I'm not your mother. If you don't come to class, okay, that's up to you. And there may be very valid reasons for that. And there were often valid reasons. My job was to help facilitate the learning. I used to say to my students all the time, I am not here to teach you. And they'd look at me and go, excuse me, what? I just paid money and you're not teaching me? No, I am not here to teach you. I am here to help facilitate your learning. Now, it's very subtle, but what that says is, it's on you to learn. It's not on me to teach you. It's on you to learn. I'm here to help you learn, and I will work very hard to help you learn, and I will facilitate that learning. But the bottom line is you got to do the work. So if you don't do the work, that isn't my problem. And it sounds a bit harsh, but it's also true. And I think when you get into the mindset of kindness and understanding and saying, look, I will help you, but my job is not to just throw information at you. My information is to help you find the information and to use that information effectively, that's when you get really good teaching. And that's when you also become a bit more understanding of where people are coming from. So going back to the question is, I may personally want face-to-face because it's easier. I can get a time set up, But there's so many other things going on in our lives. And we're all the same, especially in COVID. We have families, things are happening, and being aware and cognizant of that will actually make us build better relationships with our students. I just realized I have totally soapboxed that particular conversation. So I apologize for just kind of going off on a tangent there, but I think it's important that we have to think differently about what our roles are, and that will actually make us more effective.
Teaching in a classroom in real time is fun. It is easier because you can be responsive to student needs. Something happens and you just draw on your experience as a subject matter expert, and good things happen in the moment, and less pre-planning by you and the students is required before you go into class. So
that's scary. That's very scary, isn't it?
It's fun, but whereas blended and online requires a lot of upfront work so that it does go smoothly. And the idea is that if you do the upfront work, it is front loaded, and then you can now assume this role of a facilitator as you go through. That's one thing that's coming out of the pandemic is students having flexibility and being it not so much flexibility that they have no structure and then nothing gets done, but having a little bit of choice in time and place when they engage with the course. And so they can fit it in with their other life commitments, just regular commitments and unforeseen pandemic related things, because we're all in this together. And so if you've pre-planned it, then, and you have these artifacts ready and the structure, your eClass framework ready, then it will unfold in that manner.
It reminds me, I use this phrase a lot. I always say, you have to do a Frozen. And what I mean by that is you have to let it go. I know, badum. Lisa, I know that you and I have had this conversation before, which is at the very beginning when Lisa and I were talking, and I was talking about, you have to let it go. You're the facilitator. So you're not the sage on the stage. You don't have all the answers. And it's hard to change your mindset away from me going blah, giving all this information I'm giving you for example, I'm giving you a scenario. I want you to talk about it, and I want you to manage that. And you're the person going around to the groups, whether it be online or face-to-face or whatever. You're letting go of that power. You're letting go of that control. And that is really difficult. And anyone who has come through a traditional educational system, as I'm pretty sure almost all of us have, is very challenging. I'm sure, Lisa, it was the same for you to get into that mindset of, I'm not giving you the information. I'm getting you to find the information. And you kind of sometimes, I know myself, when I was back in the day, in the before times when we actually had classes and face-to-face, I remember walking around the class thinking a bit of a fraud. I'm not standing up and espousing all this knowledge. I'm just walking around and talking to my students. But what I found was, and the same thing happens online when you're going into breakout rooms and so on. What I found was I was empowering my students, but I was also empowering myself, because I was going around the tables and saying, okay, tell me how you're working on. Like Lisa, you're talking about having to make a web page. So I go into a breakout room, or I'd be going into the face-to-face and saying, like, how are you getting on? And what I found was that students who were in smaller groups were less self-conscious about asking me a question. So in a group of 4, even if I was online, they would say, Graham, I'm not getting this. Great. Okay, that's fine. Let me talk about it. And then I go into the next breakout room, or I'll go into the next table, and they say, we're not getting this. And all of a sudden I realized, you're not getting this. Okay, I need to rethink this. But it helped me to build up my rapport with my students. But I found that it actually made me a much better facilitator and a much better teacher, because at the end of the day, they felt empowered to ask me questions. They felt empowered to engage more effectively. And it also, and this was the most important thing, it gave me time. I didn't have to be spending all this time. It was all preloaded, as you said, Anita. You preload all that planning. You do all that work. All those videos are done. And that takes time. There's no doubt about it. It takes time. But then during the sessions, all that work is done. I'm not worrying about writing my lecture. It's done. All I have to do is sit there and facilitate. Here's my scenario for the day. Let's talk about it. I want you to work on your web pages, in your groups. I'll come around and help you with that. It made my life so much better because I wasn't worrying about having to do this lecture every week. And I just found it made me refine the joy of teaching.
Yeah, I'd also say that for the facilitator role, when you're doing is there a traditional blended learning, but the type that we're talking about where, we have the knowledge transfer asynchronously, and then we're doing facilitated learning in the classroom. The things that I had to learn is how to make a good prompt so that the students know what they're responding to, but also to not give them a prompt that results in something that is empty of content. So there has to be, and this goes back to what CTL says for the very first step for any course is set your learning outcomes for your students, which, I didn't appreciate till I took Graham's learning outcomes class where we practiced what those are. And then I'm like, oh gosh, yeah, that makes sense. So when the prompts match the learning outcomes and when the product of that facilitated discussion is something meaningful, then they respond much more, they're much more engaged and they respond in more meaningful ways. But if you just give a prompt and it's like, okay, let's fill up an hour with a conversation about something that's not related to your learning outcomes, then they're like, why are we here? This is a waste of time. Sadly, I learned a lot of that by trial and I failed a couple times. But I guess a lot of us have been through that too.
Yeah. You've made a good point with learning outcomes, Lisa, that we haven't said the word learning outcomes in an hour and 15 minutes. And it's a very important point of the concept of backward design. If you do take that time to hone your learning outcomes, to construct them carefully, those verbs in the learning outcomes will inform the activities and the assessments, the prompts, the activities, the assessments that you develop. And then that's the roadmap for students. And then also, if you have your learning outcomes, it'll become more apparent. Well, what's my blend? Here's how the learning outcomes will help you decide what is the content that students engage with asynchronously, and what are those verbs? What are those actions that now turn into activities that we need to do in class together?
Yeah, to give a meaningful practice to reach the goal of the learning outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
It's true. The learning outcomes is the backbone of everything. I mean, people think really, but it is. If you have good learning, not good. If you have excellent learning outcomes, then you know what you're going to teach. The students know what they're going to learn. The students can identify, have I learned it? It helps you when you're planning and teaching. And it also helps you when you're assessing because and the students know exactly what you're assessing because the learning outcomes tell them that. Learning outcomes is often the kind of put to the side, oh, well, I have to do this. I have no learning outcome. But if they're done correctly, it makes your life so much easier. I've put a link in the chat to the page where you can get more information about learning outcomes. CTL has a booklet, a guide about that. But again, as with everything we've been talking about, if you have any questions, you want some support, just ask for a consultation by going to ctl.guide/consultation request. You can find the link there as well in the website. And we're more than happy to help you out with that.
I like Katie's comment that I mean, if you're a tenure instructor, if you have concerns because your teaching isn't just what you do. You're balancing teaching, service, research. You've got a lot to do. Teaching is not everything. But then, as Katie's pointed out, for instructors on a contract basis, you feel like the stakes are higher. You got to get it right the first time, or else you don't get asked back for the class. So whether the stakes are high for that reason, or the stakes are high because this is we're giving you more work to do and you're already very busy. Finding the solution, the learning outcomes are going to be beneficial in both of those scenarios for making the work that you do effective and making the work that you do efficient for both of those cases.
I think we seem to be coming to a kind of natural close there. So is there anything else, Lisa, you'd like to add in closing?
I guess from the, I appreciate being part of this conversation because I'm CTL's best audience because I was clueless about most things when, you start an academic job at a big research institution. We're not necessarily trained or told how to teach. And science, I don't know if it's worse than it is in other disciplines, but I think that trying things out and as best as you can, relinquish the fear and panic and recognize that the students are your allies and not your enemies. They actually greatly appreciate any efforts that we put forward. They're not going to, so of course, some of them might say snarky comments or have, things that are hard to take when it comes to the questionnaires they fill out at the end of the term. But each one of those comments is something that we can take away to become better instructors. And it's taken me, 25 years to figure out how to teach a college level class. And I'm still learning. I'm still trying things. I'm still experimenting. So I think if we can not be afraid of it and try to have fun and recognize the students are our allies and not our, they're not something to be feared.